Hey, what's up everybody? It's your mortgage expert, Brian McCauley here. So are you seeing the Dallas housing market soften and you're thinking about making a lowball offer? Stick around. I'm going to show you why that's a bad move. So listen, we all know the housing market is cooling off. Yes, cooling off, not crashing. I think a correction is a great thing right now. But if you're a buyer out there and you're wanting to capitalize on this market and you're thinking about making a lowball offer, I am going to suggest that you don't do that for a couple of reasons. Let's start out with reason number one. Number one is if you're looking to get a concession on the property, let's just say $20,000, $30,000 off the price, I would encourage you to offer full list price on that house, but take that concession and closing cost. You can use it to cover up all your closing costs. You can use some of that money for repairs, renovations, upgrades. There are a lot more things on a house that you can do with a concession versus take it off the price of the house. And you as the buyer will benefit much, much greater. With that $20,000 or $30,000 in closing cost credit, number one, the closing costs will get paid for. So if you've got $10,000 or $15,000 and the seller covers that for you, you will literally come to the table with $10,000 or $15,000 less. That's hard cash on cash for you. There's a higher and better use for the money. And I think doing a seller concession towards closing costs is number one, the smart move. The thing that I'm seeing with that too is a lot of clients are worried about the mortgage payment because of the interest rates, and I want you to think about what other debt that you may have. Credit card debt, auto debt, anything in that $10,000 to $15,000 range, and you can take that additional $10,000 to $15,000 that you're saving, cash on cash out of pocket, and use that to pay off that other debt. That will benefit you much more from a cash on cash component. Number two, you got to think about it as a buyer, right? $20,000 off the price of the house feels good emotionally, but what it does is it kills the comparables in the area. So if the house that you're buying is $500,000 and you ask for the $20,000 off the price of the house, now that new comparable, if you buy that house at $480,000, that's the new comp in the marketplace. Yes, it feels good to get a deal on the house, but I will promise you, your neighbors are not going to be happy that you got that house for $480,000 because now that's the new comparable in your neighborhood, and all of a sudden, the psychology of the sale is, well, this person dropped down to $480,000, so the next person is going to drop down to $470,000, $460,000, $450,000, so on and so forth. And the challenge with that is, people work hard to build up equity in their neighborhoods and their houses. A lot of people rely on that equity for retirement. A lot of people rely on that equity to cash out in the future, pay off debts, send their kids to college. So if you want to take a concession on a property, do me a favor, do it in the closing cost credit component. Don't do it off the price of the house. That's part one. Part two, here's another major reason that people don't know. Let's just say in theory, somebody wants to refinance their house in a year or two because their interest rate right now is 6%. And they say, hey, I'm going to put down 20%. I'm going to take the 6% rate right now, but in 12 to 15 months, I'm going to refi that interest rate from 6% to 4% and save myself $300 on the payment. The challenge is when you lowball offers and you put 20% down right now, again, we'll use that $500,000 property as kind of the example and the standard. If you offer $480,000 and let's just say 6 months from now, somebody else offers $460,000, and let's say 6 months from then, a year from now, somebody offers $450,000. Well, all of a sudden, your $500,000 comparable house that you paid $480,000 and put 20% down on is now worth $440,000. So what happens when you go back to refinance, you were currently at a 20% equity position, but if your house has lost 5 or 10% of equity since you bought your house, because everybody's lowballing in the area, your loan to value is no longer 80% and maybe more like 85 or 90. And as the buyer, you say, well, why does that matter for me? Because on a refinance, you want the strongest equity position possible. Number one, it benefits you from the cheapest interest rate. Number two, if you have a conventional loan and you have greater than 80% loan to value, all of a sudden now you have private mortgage insurance that has to get added back into the payment. So where you could benefit from a 6% interest rate down to a 4 and maybe save $250 a month, now because your loan to value is above 80%, you've got to add PMI back into that equation on the payment, and that PMI could be anywhere from $50 to $150. So now your savings of $250 that you once had now maybe drops down to $200 or $150, and therefore causing less financial improvement for you as the buyer. So that's something else that people need to think about when they are making these strategic offers on houses, is not only maximizing the closing cost piece, protecting the equity in the neighborhood, but when it comes time to refinance and you want to refinance, if people continue to lowball in your area, in your neighborhood, your loan to value won't be what it is whenever you go to refinance. It'll be higher, it'll be worse, causing you to potentially have a higher interest rate, but also potentially have private mortgage insurance, which really eats into the savings of the home loan payment. So number 3 is really the appraisal on the property. So the appraisal has 3 components: the value, the condition, and the economic market. I want to talk about that in detail for a minute. So number 1 is the value. The value is the value. It is what it is. That's what the market is going for your property at that time. Number 2 is the condition of the property. The condition is split into 2 categories: as is or subject to. As is means, hey, the property is all good. It doesn't need anything additional. You can go ahead and buy it and complete the transaction. Subject to might be something where the value itself is good, but maybe it needs a little bit of work. Maybe there's some foundation, maybe there's some plumbing, maybe there's some electrical, something along those lines to where it doesn't affect the quote unquote value of the house, but the appraiser deems that there's a couple things that need to be done to the property prior to, and those have to be fixed by the seller. But number 3 is the big one that I want to talk about. It is the economic trend. So regardless of the value of the house, regardless of the condition of the house, the appraiser must state what's going on economically with the trends in the area. They have to check one of 3 boxes: increasing, decreasing, or stable. Now, in the past 10 years, every appraiser probably in Dallas, Texas has clicked the box that says increasing, or worst case scenario, stable. What happens in a market that's starting to correct, if people continue to lowball offers, over time, that economic trend will turn from increasing and stable down to declining. And here's the reason why that matters. So what we don't want is we don't want buyers buying into a community or a neighborhood where the decline in the area is more than 10% in a 12-month time frame. Let me repeat that. We don't want buyers buying a property, even if the value is good and the condition is good, buying a property that is in an area that is declining more than 10% in a 12-month window. Here's why. So let's say buyer goes to buy a house. They're buying a $500,000 house. They're putting 5% down. The appraisal comes back to us. The value is good. The condition is good. But all of a sudden, that appraiser checks the box over here and says, hey, in the past 9 to 12 months, even though the value is good now, the comparables in the area economically are declining. They're going the wrong way. And so what happens is, if the appraiser has to notate that box that the economic trend is declining, there's a mortgage rule that says if the area is declining by more than a 10% delta in a 12-month window, the current new buyer cannot do maximum financing on that home loan. That is correct. They cannot do maximum financing on the home loan. So if they were doing a 95% conventional loan, the bank requires now, instead of doing 5% down, which is maximum financing, they must do 10% down. This causes a huge issue, but let me explain to you why first. So if something's declining more than 10% in a 12-month window and a buyer does maximum financing at 95% loan to value, the bank thinks, hey, even though the house value is good, things lately have been going in the wrong direction. What we don't want is somebody to do 95% financing. The value is good now, but that value is continuing to decline in the next 12 months. Let's just say it puts that buyer upside down in the property to where they're at a negative equity position. So when people are at negative equity positions, it encourages them to usually bail out of the house and say, hey, I can't get my money back. This is going to be an issue. I either want the bank to forgive some of my mortgage balance to right side my loan to value, or I'm going to do what's called a buy and bail. I bought, but now I'm upside down. I'm just going to bail out on the property, let it foreclose, start over, because I'm never going to get my money back. That is the biggest concern with making lowball offers and pulling markets down over a period of time, is we don't want that heavy decline. You know, the last piece about that from a buyer's standpoint, and if you're a realtor as well, is that if you're a great buyer and you're putting 5% down and you've got great credit and the current value of the house is great and the current condition is great, but you get that appraisal report back and you can see that things are declining or decreasing more than 10% in a 12-month window, I, as the loan officer, have to come back to that realtor and buyer and say, hey, by the way, everything looks good on paper, but this appraiser said, you know, that this area is decreasing by more than 10% in a 12-month window, and I'm sorry, but you're going to have to double up your down payment or move to the next tier. Well, number one, a lot of buyers don't have that extra money. So if they were doing 5% down, now they're doing 10% down, they have to double their down payment. So a lot of times they don't have the money, and it can be very frustrating to them. Number two, even if they have the money, a lot of times they don't want to do it. They need to say, hey, Brian, I need to keep that money for some cushion and safety $150 in the bank account. I need to use that from other debt, so on and so forth. So even if they have it, they don't want to do it. The third thing for me about that component is the biggest piece where, it can really kill the spirit of the buyer. And honestly, there's not really a good way for a buyer and a realtor to know how much an area is decreasing or declining over a 12-month period. It's going to put more burden back on the realtor to do additional work and pull comps. So these are just things that I know with years of experience that have happened. Again, it hasn't happened in Dallas in a long time. These are important things to pay attention to. These are important things I want to educate people on. And these are important things I want people to understand and know when heading to the marketplace and making offers on properties. So listen, if you found this information helpful, do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe. If you want to leave a comment below or have some questions, go ahead. I promise to get back to you. Or if you just want to set up a phone call or a consultation, do us a favor, call us, email us, text. Just know that I'm always here for you. Until next time, stay tuned.